everyone. Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast. I'm here today at Mastermind Studios with Lauren Harris, who, if you have seen episode 9, Lauren was on that. We were talking about the filmmaking process and in particular a film that we're working on about human trafficking. And so we're so excited because today we have the lovely Anne-Marie Jones and Carol Metzker with us today, zooming in from Philly. And they are just two incredible women that have helped us so much with this process of making this film. They both have co-authored a book called A Shield Against the Monster, and that is protecting children from human trafficking. I have a surprise, Lauren, because Lauren
this is a huge day
has
for
complained time and time again that I still have her book. And so I would like to give it back. But really quick, I just wanted to show the book because it is such a great resource to just educate communities about what human trafficking looks like in our backyards and signs to look for so that we can protect children from human trafficking. So here you go, Lauren. I don't want to hear another word about having that.
This is an autographed copy, okay? Like, I could sell this on the internet for a lot of money, guys. But I keep it for myself.
Okay, well, moving on here. I just want to introduce Anne-Marie and Carol. So they both, like I said, co-authored this book. Anne-Marie herself is a survivor of sex trafficking, and she works now to help women that are going through what she endured. She works at Dawn's Place, which is a residence in Philadelphia for female survivors of human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. That is also where Carol volunteers. She's volunteered there for years. They are both speakers and educators about human trafficking, writers and allies for survivors. So I am so excited to welcome them. Without further ado, warm welcome to Anne-Marie and Carol. Hi, ladies.
Hello. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, we're so happy because I feel like Lauren and I, we've had so much like virtual interaction with you guys throughout the pandemic, and anyone that listened to the episode I did with Lauren, we talked about the film that we made and how we were able to pull it off in the middle of a pandemic, and you guys were just so flexible and helpful and gracious with your time and support. So we're so grateful for you, and it's always so good to see you guys.
100%.
But yeah, Lauren, do you want to start out by just explaining to anyone that's listening how we met Anne-Marie and Carol?
Yeah, for sure. So Kirsten and I have known each other for years, as I think we outlined in the previous episode. And we kind of were living these like parallel lives. We both came to LA after growing up in the Philly area. And finally, we like really reconnected and started like actually developing our friendship, I would say, like after years.
Like 10 years.
Yeah. And Kirsten had approached me because she knew that I produced and she was producing things about doing a project on human trafficking. And at the time, I didn't really know much about human trafficking, but my mom was actually on the board of Dawn's Place that we just spoke about. So I reached out to her and I was like, can you help me with researching? Can you make any introductions for me? So she ended up connecting us with Mary DeFusco, who then connected us with Anne-Marie and Carol. Anne-Marie was gracious enough to share her story with me, which I was incredibly inspired by. She gave me my copy of the book, which you can see is why it's so beloved to me. I introduced Kirsten to them, and we all started connecting and working on this project together. And I remember pre-pandemic, I was flying from Philly to LA to meet with you both and do further research on the project. So it's been nice that we're still able to stay connected in the post-pandemic world and still move forward with our project.
Right, right. And Carol and Anne-Marie, you guys met at Dawn's Place, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I was a resident at Dawn's Place, and Carol volunteered, and she came and did activities with us. That's how I got to meet Carol.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Kirsten and Lauren, you guys said that your lives ran parallel. I guess you could say Anne-Marie and I had lives that intersected. All of a sudden, there we were, seemingly living two very, very different lives. And all of a sudden, we ended up in the same place.
Wow,
Exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's just such a serendipitous story of how you guys met, how we met, and how we all are working together. So it's really been just such an honor. And for anyone listening, before we really get into some stories here, I just wanted to lay out the definition of human trafficking because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of confusion. I know before I even got involved in this work, I really thought it only happened abroad, that it looked like the movie Taken, and that it actually is happening in our backyard. So the definition that the U.S. Department of Justice defines it as is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sexual act. If the person's over age 18, if someone's under age 18 and they're participating in any kind of commercial sex, that is automatically human trafficking because they're a minor and they cannot consent to that. And like I said, there usually is a force, fraud, or coercion. And so there really usually is this grooming process, which we can talk a little more about. It's not, and sometimes people are kidnapped, but I feel like a lot of times it really is that grooming process, at least in what I've heard. 821, which is another organization that I've worked with, they define human trafficking as the abuse and illegal trade of human beings. It's the recruitment, control, and use of people for their bodies and their labor. It is modern day slavery. If you guys want to add in there at all, the other thing that I always tell people is that traffickers really prey on the vulnerabilities of individuals. People's vulnerabilities look so different depending on where you are in the world and the circumstances that you've grown up in. Different people's vulnerabilities can look very different. So human trafficking often doesn't just look black and white in one way. So I know, Carol, also you spent some time in Nepal. So we could even talk about how it looked in Nepal versus how you've seen some cases in Philadelphia.
I've done anti-human trafficking projects in Nepal, India. I've actually spent quite a lot of time in India, and I think that while there are some individual differences in various countries and how maybe the circumstances arise, certainly different levels of poverty and different sorts of vulnerabilities. Ultimately, it is modern slavery, and it is preying on humans and using whatever is vulnerable against them to exploit them. And there's a lot of violence.
Yeah. As I mentioned, human trafficking does happen in the US, which, like I said, I was initially surprised by. And there are different types of traffickers that I've heard about. Like there's Romeo traffickers, where people will show romantic interest in someone and then slowly manipulate them into human trafficking. Do you want to explain some other ways that it can happen in the US, Lauren?
I feel like Carol, honestly, might be the best one to ask about the way it would look. I'm not the expert here.
Yeah.
There are guerrilla traffickers, being those who use extreme violence against people. Sometimes that is, harming someone, sexually putting it on film, doing, something, there's nudity, or putting someone in a situation where they threaten to show the video to somebody they love. There's violence. There's force, fraud, and coercion covers a lot of territory. You've got guerrilla pimps, you've got Romeo pimps. And when I say pimps, that's how they are referred to, perhaps, on the street. But they are traffickers, Romeo pimps. There's sneaker pimps is what we call, the boy next door selling the girl next door, or someone young just out there as an individual, selling someone on the playground, kids on the playground. And of course, there's organized crime. People are infinitely creative, and they can do infinitely creative good things. They can also use their creative genius to do some pretty terrible things to people.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing how it really can happen right in your own backyard.
I went one day to a store to get some bamboo plants for our residents at Dawn's place, just as little gifts for them. And there was a Chinese lady behind the counter. It was her store, and she had said to me, "Wow, you're buying a lot of these bamboos." And I said, "Yes, they're for my residents where I work at." And she says, "Oh, what kind of work do you do?" And I said, "I work in human trafficking field." And she said, "My God, I thought that only happened on TV." And I said to her, "No, it's happening right in our backyards." And she was shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people often are like, and especially as I know Lauren and I embarked on producing this film, even when we talk about it, people are surprised because it is something The organization I mentioned, 821, they say it's a crime that's hidden but in plain sight. Like, it really is happening all around us, and you need to know what to look for, which is why I'm so grateful too for the work that you guys have done and the book that you guys wrote talking about the different types of pimps. I know that you guys kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you guys were saying that it was a play on how pimps have playbooks to teach each other these tactics to exploit individuals, and your guys' book is like teaching almost tactics of like how to look out for these signs of trafficking so that it's that shield against the monster of trafficking. I love that, and I would love if you guys could just explain a little bit more about how the book is laid out.
Kirsten, you're so correct. We did design this book to be a playbook for parents, caregivers, coaches, teachers, people who cherish children. When I was doing some of the research for this book, and certainly Anne Marie and I had been working against human trafficking and with helping survivors for many years, but as we were working on the book, I was doing a little research, and on a Facebook page, I actually found a manual on breaking and selling girls. That post, a couple of posts were absolutely graphic. They were violent, vile, and very specific on how to do this. And that was just further realization for us that if it is that easy to find how to do something terrible to not just a girl, we tend to speak about girls and women because those are so much of who we work with, and that is so much of the statistic. But anyone looking for ways, if it's so easy to find information about harming another human, we decided we were going to provide the playbook for how to help humans.
I love that.
So the book itself is laid out particularly around stories. If there was anything that Anne-Marie and I wanted people to understand when they read this book, there were two things. One is this is real. This is real life. As you said, it's not just a Hollywood plot. We also wanted them to come away with the understanding of what sometimes people go through, and therefore to come away with tips that will help people protect children, that will help adults teach children how to strengthen themselves. Obviously, kids can't do everything. They can't protect themselves. They're small. They are vulnerable. But we can provide them with ways that they can reach out to help. And then, of course, provide ways for the community to get together and say, traffickers are not welcome here.
Well, and I think the book is so powerful because with those stories, you're able to develop an understanding and relationships. Like for me, I feel like I'm always more interested in topics when there's a relationship that I can see and like somebody who I can have empathy for. And I think the book does such a good job of illustrating all of these different people that you feel like you know, or you feel like you've seen them in a person, or there's somebody that you can relate to, which I think really helps to understand the gravity of the situations.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes it can be desensitizing to think of the numbers and the data and the statistics. And, right now the estimate of victims worldwide of human trafficking is 40.3 million people. That can be really desensitizing and overwhelming. Like, how am I going to make an impact? But when you think of it as you can help one human life and you think of focusing on the one, that has really, really helped me too. So I love that you guys provide those tangible stories to really connect and empathize.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, Lauren, you used a really important word that Anne-Marie and I were just talking about the other day, and that is relationships. That is sort of at the root of not just the book, but how Anne-Marie and I have gotten to know each other. And of course, some of the things that we've done with the two of you, Lauren and Kirsten. We're constantly learning, we're constantly seeing things from a new way and constantly understanding how, even though our lives have sort of come together, we've intersected, it is just one world out there, and we can learn from each other's perspectives. I don't know, Anne-Marie, you may want to tell the story about the day maybe that you broke your flip-flop, because then I'll tell my background story of flip-flops, and then maybe Lauren can tell what happened to her. Was it Lauren or
It
Kirsten?
was me.
It was Lauren.
Yeah.
With the broken flip-flop. Anyway, Anne-Marie, talk to us about flip-flops.
I carried a bag around with me when I was, excuse me, when I was in the streets, and this bag meant everything to me because it kind of had my whole life in the bag, and it was a plastic bag from, just a regular old grocery store, but this plastic bag meant everything to me. So it had clothes in there, it had deodorant, it had shoes, flip-flops. If it was summertime, it was mainly flip-flops I had in there. So one night I was walking around so much. I was it was forever. It felt like I was walking around and my flip-flops broke. And I didn't have a pair of shoes to put back on because I only had that one pair of flip-flops. I didn't have another pair. So I walked around, with broken flip-flops on.
So, as a survivor ally, one of my
Mhm.
jobs with an organization that I worked with was to provide resources. And while the best thing that people could give was donations, how do you provide a roof and staff members and the electricity so that a survivor or a victim can have a shower, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Some of the other things I provided were getting donors to provide, shampoo and
Deodorant.
housing supplies when they finally got had a new home. But during the summer in particular, one of the things that I would try to find was flip-flops, because we had that understanding that if you don't have your own money, if you're
Mhm.
being controlled, someone tells you you're not going to buy a pair of flip-flops, you go barefoot. Maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the
Yeah.
control.
Mhm.
So we made sure that one of the centers had a couple hundred pairs of flip-flops for people coming in every day.
Mm.
And that might not sound like a big deal, hundreds of flip-flops for women to, get to pick and choose through. But it is a big deal because it means a lot to have, a pair of shoes on while you're in that kind of life. Like s- it's hard to explain. You know, they could be 99 cents, but to us, it's $1 million pair of shoes on our feet.
Mm. Yeah.
Especially when walking around an area
Exactly.
of sidewalk where there may be used needles on the ground, uh, used condoms, all sorts of trash, maybe even human excrement.
Mm.
Well, so when we were doing the video work for Lauren and Kirsten's project, the most interesting thing happened. I had taken along a bag of just stuff that I might have taken along when I was going down to Kensington, an area of Philadelphia known for buying sex and drugs. And so just because that would have been a normal thing for me to put in the bag, I put in a pair of flip flops. And this is where what happened to Lauren kind of brought it all together.
Yeah, so when we were filming, I had been wearing flip flops. And as we were filming, and we didn't film exactly in Kensington, but an area that looked really similar to Kensington because it wasn't safe during the pandemic. So we were walking around these streets, and my flip flop broke. And luckily, Carol had the flip flops for me to change into because of this experience. And we ended up including a portion of that into our film. But one of the things that I love that Anne-Marie always says is how when people are in the life, they're not treated as human beings and they're not looked at as human beings, which is something that I really love about the book because I feel like it really does humanize these people and it becomes not just a number, it becomes a face. Like you hear 40.3 million people and it's incredibly overwhelming and incredibly depressing, but you're like, how can I make a small dent in
Right.
helping this problem? But being able to see a face and empathize with a person, I feel like makes all the difference.
Right. And the stories too, to identify what to even look for and how it happens, so that you can be aware of. I know one of the tactics of traffickers is to train you not to look in their eyes. And so even if someone's avoiding eye contact a lot and things like that, just if something, and this is what I tell a lot of people, if something seems off to you, you know, like follow that gut feeling. There's hotlines that you can call and report. And so I'll add that in there too. But I love that you guys give those stories too, so that it just gives a contextual understanding. And I love the serendipity of the flip-flop moment.
Yeah.
I feel like in filmmaking, there's always things that are quote unquote mistakes or can go wrong in production, but then it actually, that's the magic of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's also the magic of life. Like there's these serendipitous moments where everything comes together. And so I love that. And thank you for sharing those stories too. And I know that you guys met at Dawn's place years ago, and you've talked a lot about how you two have learned a lot from each other over the years, and that you've had these very different experiences, but that, like you mentioned before, Carol, that they kind of intersected at such a beautiful moment. And so I would love if you could just explain what you guys have learned from each other over the years.
I think as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, Anne-Marie and I probably, if you would have asked us 14 or 15 years ago, what do we have in common? We probably would have said nothing. And yet, because we met, as you say, we came together, we realized that we are seeing the same world. There aren't two different worlds out there. This is one world. And maybe she saw one side of the world and I saw a different world. And even the two of you, Lauren and Kirsten, have provided yet again different angles of us seeing this. But I think that building the relationship and really beginning to talk with each other, what were things like for Anne-Marie? What if she saw a woman, coming from the suburbs, walking down the street, how would a typical woman from the suburbs treat her? And what would I have thought? Anne-Marie has taught me what it means to be homeless, how she didn't visit, a grocery store for 10 years. There are things that have broken my heart to realize that she and other survivors who have become friends may have eaten from the trash. They may have had no shoes except one pair of flip-flops that they carried around in a plastic bag that had maybe nothing more than some deodorant and a toothbrush. These are the sorts of things that have really sort of opened my eyes, and to tell other people we need to do something. And Anne-Marie certainly, learning how to be able to trust you and to realize that you're always honest with me, has been an amazing thing.
And,
Maybe you can talk about that.
and that, when I met Carol at Dawn's place. I think it was the might have been the first month I arrived at Dawn's place. I met Carol, and I was broken. I didn't. It was hard for me to trust anyone, and to live in a house that was ran by nuns. Growing up as a child, I nuns were, God and everything like that. And, they protected you, but I didn't trust them either. I didn't trust a soul. I didn't, I lived in them streets for 14 years, and the only person that I trusted in that 14 years was me. No one around me. And when I met Carol in Dawn's place and she came to do this activity with us, and at that time, our house was filled. So we had 8 women at that time. And we all sat around this dining room table. This dining room table is so big. I don't know if you ever seen the picture of the Last Supper, but that's what that table reminded me of, was the Last Supper. And we're all sitting around it. And Carol brought a couple of her friends with her. And we're sitting around and we're doing activities, and I'm just listening. And it was normal conversation. It was conversation from these women to us, that they cared about us, that we could trust them. And that's where I started to learn how to trust another human being again in my, and I was 44 years old sitting at that table.
Mm.
Mm. Well, yeah.
So Carol spoke about the grocery store. The director of Dawn's place, she took me food shopping. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I got stuck in the middle of in the grocery store because I didn't know how to go food shopping. I had forgotten. So I had somebody there, every 2 weeks to take me food shopping and teach me how to do this. So I had to trust her that she was showing me the right way to go food shopping again. Um, Carol, like Carol's an amazing person in my life, and the relationship that we have. I look at Carol not only as a friend, not only as a volunteer. I look at Carol as my family. Carol has been in my life for 10 years now, and I've had some up and downs. I've had some death. I've had, my twin daughters were brought back into my life again, and I looked at Carol as, she's a mother. She doesn't even realize this, and she might not even know this until right now I'm going to say this, but she taught me how to be a mother again, and that in itself is the best relationship that I could ever ask for between me and Carol.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, you two are truly some of the most inspiring, resilient, strong people that I know.
Yeah.
And I remember right after meeting Anne Marie and telling her that we really wanted to work on this project with her, and she introduced me to Carol. And Carol was definitely a mother bird, and making sure she asked me like 20 questions, like, what are your intentions with this?
Yeah.
Why do you want to do this? Like, who are you? And then I think I was able to win her over enough, because I remember after I came back a few times, they would be in their house making cookies, and the whole house would smell just like of these delicious cookies, and the cats are running around, and it was just such like a warm atmosphere, and it made me feel so included. I remember the day that we went to Kensington too. You both just like really held my hand and walked me through it, and I just think that the way you've opened up your lives to us has just been so incredible, and we're so grateful for it.
You guys are so amazing. And it's really, as we were saying, it's about the relationships, it's about the stories. And so even just in the filmmaking process can be a long, arduous one. And having the relationships has made it the most fulfilling thing ever. And you guys have made it such a joy and a pleasure to work with. So I'm so excited to be on this journey with you guys, and just really grateful as well.
Thank you. I love having you.
Thanks. It is absolutely mutual.
Yeah.
And by the way, you guys will laugh at this, but I think I'm a pansy sometimes.
Of course, it's a flower reference.
Of course, it's a flower reference. I like flowers. But someone did tell me once that when it came to survivors who I believe deserve more protection than they've had, they have always had to rely on themselves. They've had to do it all. I think sometimes when they're recovering, they need a break, and they deserve to have someone else do the protecting for them, so they can focus on inward, what's going on in their own heads and in their own lives. So yes, I can get protective, and while I try not to be intense, sometimes it just comes out. And one of my former colleagues said, Carol, you're a bulldog, a friendly one, but you are a bulldog.
Um, I remember a time that Carol came to Dawn's place when I was a resident, and she was doing this activity, and she was making origamis, and I did not know how to make this origami, and it was really driving me crazy sitting at that table trying to make this. And I at that time, I really didn't have patience. I didn't have tolerance to just sit there and try to make this. I tried to make it the first time. I couldn't do it. I was done with it. And Carol, she sat with me, and And it doesn't sound like a lot. It doesn't sound like a big deal. But at that time, she was patient. She said, "Hey, Marie, you can do this." There was times in my life that people told me I couldn't do things. And she sat with me, and it's just a piece of paper. But do you know how good I felt after she showed me that I could do this and I did it? And it was beautiful. So that's the type of person Carol is. Like and I'm not putting her on a pedestal. She's awesome. Like she I wouldn't ask for a better person to be in my life.
And I think we can all learn something from that. Anyone listening, whether you are interested in engaging in this work, to really just be there for people, be there for people in your lives, listen, be patient. And I love that. And I'm, as we've said like 5 times, and we're just inspired by the both of you.
My favorite Anne-Marie story is about the Pilates.
I don't think I've heard the Pilates story.
I hated Pilates. I hated it. We had to do Pilates once a week at Dawn's place. And this lady, she was younger than me, actually, this young girl, she was like, so like, hurrah, hurrah, Pilates, I'm here. And she would come in and, 2 days before the day of Pilates, I had a whole attitude because I knew Pilates was coming, and we had to do it. So she would come in and she'd be like, "Ladies, let's go. Come on, it's Pilates day." And I'm like, "Oh God, no, please." But we would do Pilates. And this one in particular day, she worked me. We went for a walk and we went to this big field, and she was having us do lunges across the field, back and forth. Now, I had some weight on me at this time. I gained some weight, so I'm not really in shape for doing some lunges. And we get back home, and I swore that day. I said, "I don't care. I am done with this Pilates. How can I get out of it?" So I had to go to. I had a therapist, and every week I went to see her, and it was on. I think I went to see her on Tuesdays. Pilates was Thursday. So this is how much I couldn't stand Pilates, that I was going to figure a way out of it. So I went to my therapist and I was like, "I really need to have my day changed because we're doing Pilates and they really want me there." And it's when I don't remember. I just said I had to have my day changed. So I had her change it to Pilates day. And she didn't know I was changing it for that. So when I got back home, Sister Eileen, she was the house coordinator. I said, "Sister, I can't do Pilates anymore." And she said, "Anne Marie, why is that?" And I said, "Well, my therapist changed my day, and it's the day that Pilates." She turned around and she said, "Don't worry about it, because Christina just made a new day, and it's the day you're available now."
Oh.
All that work I did to get out of it. But anyway, when she had came again, and we were all waiting for her in the living room, and she came in her jolly old self, and I had a whole instant attitude, and I said, "I'm not doing it." And Sister Eileen and Sister Michelle, she was the director. They said, "Anne Marie, you are going to do it. Everybody has to do it." I said, "The only way I'm going to do it is if you two come out and do it with us." They said, "Well, we don't have to. You do, though," and made me do it.
Oh.
So I hate Pilates. I don't go. I don't even look at Pilates.
That's amazing.
Anne-Marie's vendetta against Pilates.
Yeah, very much. So. Very, very much.
Well, I also hate Pilates, so I respect the effort to get out of it.
I really tried hard. I swear I did. And it's crazy how I would get a whole attitude 2 days before it even came.
Everyone hates Pilates. In that case, I will stand up. I will be the lone person who says, "Pilates people, you're okay."
Yeah.
Kirsten loses all the subscribers who love Pilates.
I do do sometimes take Pilates classes, but I hate every second of it. I also dread it, and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But it is good for you. So anyone listening,
It is
you're
good.
not.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
it's good for your posture.
Isn't it one of the like one of the weird parts of life is that some of the greatest things that happen to us come after, we go through pain or a struggle. Even, as Anne Marie has talked about being a survivor. Anne Marie, would you change your life? I mean, there are things, yeah, but look where you've come. You've written a book, you have a house, you love life the way other people wish they loved life.
Yeah, I would, I did an interview with a news reporter for the Inquirer, and she asked me, she said, "Would you do anything different in your life?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't want anything to happen differently because what I went through, even as a child, I came out of it the person I am today. For me, going through all of that made me who I am today."
We are all masterpieces of broken pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
something we talked about. Actually, one of the projects we did at Dawn's place once, we were painting rocks to do a rock garden, a memorial rock garden, because so many of the survivors had lost people they loved. That we painted rocks, and one of them wrote, "We are all masterpieces of broken pieces." And that became a metaphor sort of for everything we do. You don't just have to be a survivor of sex trafficking or human trafficking or other terrible things to have gone through things that have broken you. And yet, perhaps the meaningful part of our relationships and being together and the whole work against human trafficking and helping survivors is you get to see what other people become, and I get to see who I become. You get to see who I become. We're all broken. We have all had hurts that are deep, wounds that go straight to the heart, and sometimes physical wounds too. And yet, look at the masterpieces that we all become when we put our pieces back together in new
Yeah.
ways.
Even
yeah.
the broken crayons in the box can still color.
Profound, Lauren.
Thank you. It's my favorite saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's amazing too how you're using the pain that you went through, Anne Marie, to now help other people. And it empowers you to empower them. And so I love everything you guys are doing. And kind of winding down here, I wanted to just share some practical ways that people can look out for human trafficking, but also I really wanted to touch upon how online means of exploitation is really increasing very rapidly right now. Especially there's been studies of how COVID has affected that. I know, Anne Marie, that you have a story about with your daughters that you shared about online means of exploitation and attempts to recruit people that way. If you wouldn't mind sharing that story.
Well, as Christine, I have twin daughters. At that time, they were 14 years old. Um, so they would come home from school, and they were told to, come home from school, grab something to eat, start your homework. I should be coming in maybe an hour and a half later from work. So this one in particular day, I got done work early, and I didn't call them to tell them I was coming home early. So I walked in the house, and in my one daughter, she was doing her homework, and I said, "Where's your sister?" And she said she's in the bathroom. So I went around doing what I normally do when I come home from work, and she was in there for quite a minute. So I knocked on the door, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she just didn't sound right to me when she said that. So I opened the door and I walked in. And when I did, she started fumbling something, and she was trying to put it in her pocket. And my first thought was she was smoking. And I thought maybe she was trying to hide the cigarettes or something. So I said, "Give me what you just put in your pocket." And she said, "No." And I said, I want what you have in your pocket. And she wouldn't give it to me. So I had to go over towards her and I took it out of her pocket and it was the phone. And it wasn't a phone that I paid for. It was a one of them Obama phones and it was a touch screen. So I'm not real good with I'm not savvy when it comes to trying to get in the phone, trying to find things out. So I took it to my daughter, my oldest daughter, which is she was in her I think she was 30 at the time. I told her what happened and she went through the phone for me. And I believe it was she met this person on Instagram, I think it was. And they were communicating with each other and she was he was asking her questions like, well, where do you go to school? How old are you? And she would tell him and then she asked him the same thing and he said, oh, I'm a graduate from your school and I'm only 15 or 16. So she was already in I think 7th grade at the time. So if he's a graduate, he's not 16, okay? So we're reading through it and everything, and he's just like asking her all kinds of stuff. Can you send me a picture of yourself? Can you send me a picture of your sister? Um, and she was doing it. And he was trying to get it like, what's your home life like? And she was like, she made up this whole big thing where she said, oh, I just got in a big fight with my mom and I pushed her and I ran out the door and I'm going to go stay at a friend's house and this, that, and the other. So he was like luring her in. And come to find out, he owned a shipping company with his father in Jamaica. So he's not a 15-year-old. He's not a 16-year-old. He's not a graduate from her school. He knows nothing about her or her school. But that's how he was trying to get all the information from her. So I didn't, even though I work in this field and I know about it, and that's my daughter, you know, I don't want them to ever have to experience anything like that. So my first thing was I picked up the phone and I called Carol. And I said, Carol, I need your help. And I explained to her. We set up a date for her to come over. And then I also, being at Dawn's place, I know an FBI agent that we deal with. And I asked her if I could, if she could come over and we talked. So I gave her the phone and she was looking into it and everything. But Carol, she was like, she was that mother, that was able to sit with me and come over and we made a day out of it. We baked cookies and we watched a tape on, what it was like, how men, get people to come. What was it called, Carol, again? Little Red?
Little Red. I am
Yeah,
Little Red, or I think is what
yeah,
it's called.
I am Little Red. And we sat and we made cookies. We did jewelry pieces on broken jewelry on plates. And she was able to talk to my daughter and show me how to be able to talk to her about it. So for that, like, it happens. It really does happen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think just being aware of that, everything comes back to awareness and I don't know if you guys want to end with just some other signs, Carol, maybe that you guys lay out in the book of some other things just to look out for and be aware in the community.
It's hard to spot a survivor of human trafficking, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. Things to look out for, especially if you know a person is vulnerable. Maybe they're in a poverty situation, maybe an LGBTQ issue is going on where maybe there's rejection by the family and society. Look for isolation. Look for a situation where someone is being controlled by another person. Are they in a doctor's office where someone wants to answer all the questions for them? Are you seeing tattoos maybe under the hairline? Um, that maybe you don't recognize. Maybe it's someone's name. Are you seeing more drinking or drugs? Are you seeing depression? Is maybe someone had mental health issues to begin with, and that was their vulnerability. Look for things that feel out of the ordinary, and just as it was either Kirsten or Lauren said earlier, listen to that gut instinct when something tells you that there's just something a little bit wrong. If you are seeing someone who is physically being harmed, it's absolutely a situation where danger is occurring, violence is occurring, that's always a call to 911. But if you're not quite sure, you're not really sure what's happening, but something just doesn't feel right. Maybe there's a long line of men outside an apartment house, and it's particularly on Friday nights or late, or maybe out in front of what you think is a spa. Maybe it's a situation where there's a constant stream of people walking in and out of a hotel room that just doesn't hit you right. Maybe there's an older man with a younger girl who doesn't seem to be his daughter, and maybe she looks a little bit uncomfortable. If a child is at risk, again, call 911, or if any adult is in the midst of being harmed, 911. If you suspect something is wrong and don't know what to do, that's your opportunity to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That number is 1-888-3737-888. Easy to remember, put 2 37s in the middle of 888s. Or you can just say 1-888-3737-888.
Thank you, Carol. Before we kind of close out here, do you guys want to add anything else? Or Lauren, do you want to add anything?
I think I'm okay. Just thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah. And where can listeners connect with you guys and learn more and find your book?
A Shield Against the Monster, Protecting Children from Human Trafficking is available digitally and in paperback. You can find it at Amazon or your favorite bookseller. Where do you like to buy books?
Or Lauren's bookcase.
If people really want to reach me, they're welcome. Or if they need to send a message to Anne-Marie, my email address, echmetzker@gmail.com.
Thank you guys both so much. Just for everything that you guys have been to us, and also for having this conversation and helping continue to educate and just bring awareness to people. I'm really grateful for you guys. I know Lauren is as well. And everyone listening, watch out. Our movie is coming out soon, and these amazing women are in it. So we're really, really excited for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. You're the best.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. I'll see you next week.